circumstances arise that bring conflict into our lives. I'm here to say that that's okay. That's okay. I'm looking down on the camera, but I'm looking up. I got my head up. I'm thinking that people are good. People are generally good. And then the next day, maybe all that will change. And maybe all of a sudden I'll be suspicious of everyone again. We have good and bad days. Conflicts do arise. And how we handle them determines our integrity, or our level of integrity with dealing with these issues. I like to think that all people are good. And then sometimes something happens where I start to think that people aren't so good. But I always have it in my heart, and I know that people generally mean well. So I was thinking of some examples that I could use. And a person who has become passive, where life has become too easy, is often, well, how do we say it? Passive. They're not very concerned with what's going on in the world. Life is grand. Everything's perfect. Now let's talk about the person who everything's going just fine, and then the bank takes their house. All of a sudden, this person is very angry at the banking system. Let's talk about the person who has a problem with drugs, and they almost overdose. All of a sudden, this person has a large problem with drugs. Or the person who takes legal drugs, pharmaceuticals, and they have the adverse effects, and all of a sudden the person is against Big Pharma. I could go on, but you see the point I'm trying to make is that whatever personal conflicts that arise in our lives is usually where we become outspoken about issues. And conflict is just part of life, because without it there would be no resolution. We wouldn't even understand what we should and shouldn't do. It all comes down to that balance of what is right and what is wrong, and what feels right and what doesn't feel right. But we have to have the integrity and the values to understand what the universe is trying to tell us, in a sense. No matter whether you believe in spirituality or essence of the soul or any of that, it doesn't matter. There seems to be one thing that is consistent, and that is whatever you resist will come at you tenfold. So if you don't deal with your situation, you don't find out what's wrong and why, it'll just get worse. If you have people who wrong you and you don't forgive, you will continue to be wronged. If you suffer and you subconsciously or consciously thrive on that suffering, you will continue to suffer. So my point here is that the perspective we take is based on our subjective experience. So the person who is a crusader against religion may have been wronged by religion. The person who's a crusader against vaccines maybe had an adverse reaction to a vaccine or knows someone who did. Someone who is very opposed to society in general may have trust issues, maybe perhaps, and I'm not generalizing here. I'm just making blanket statements that don't cover everyone, but there seem to be significant, notable commonalities within all of our lives. And one of those is that what we speak out against the most are things that affect us personally. So if very few people are speaking out on an issue, it doesn't mean that it's less important. It could mean one of two things. Either it's not that important to society as a whole, or society is not as aware of it as they should be. For example, the fact that the banking cartels run the world. This is something I'm, well aware of. That, whether you believe in Illuminatis or conspiracy or any of that, there are figures, people, who make the decisions for everybody. And so there's very few people that really speak out on that compared to the mass amount of people in society. But that doesn't mean it's less important. It just means that it's not as well revealed and not as well known. And sometimes things are so insanely wild, and the truth is so crazy compared to even fiction, that people just won't believe it. Many of the crusaders today are speaking out against the lies that we've been told by our government and by our, uh, our military, which are two separate entities. And that distrust is carried to every branch of society. And it's understandable. I was stolen from when I was younger, and I started to distrust everyone. I got over that. But when something happens to you personally, or you see some revelation that you weren't aware of, it can hit you hard. And back in 1998, 96 to I think 98, I was pretty obsessed with Illuminati conspiracies. I read Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper and became way too engulfed in that kind of stuff. And I realized that my trust issues, and the reason why I attached to that was because it affected me directly, because I had trust issues because of, people who had wronged me. And so once I got over that, I was able to see things clearly and become more passive. And my life is much better because of it. However, I don't take shit from nobody. And that's the part I wanted to make the point of. You still have to stand up for what you believe is right. And fortunately, we can listen to others and formulate opinions based on what others believe too. We shouldn't be so attached to the things that we think are important. In other words, each person needs to analyze the things that they find important and ask themselves why. So, I hear chaos in the house, so I gotta go. Peace.